Pokemon Go, we're moving on, has lost over 10 million daily users since it peaked in mid-July, and its number of downloads, engagement, and time spent on the game are also dropping off. You know, this is bound to happen with any mobile game, of course, but it begs the question whether its bare-bones features are catching up to it. Gamnesia editor Stephen Rollins thinks there's nothing we can really do to save it, arguing that there's just too little content to keep the game engaging in the way that Candy Crush and other famous apps were. And Niantic's ability to strike while the iron's hot with engaging new in-game features and commercial products like the Pokemon Go wristband has doomed Pokemon Go to losing all its hype, especially with the mainstream, before it really offers anything worth getting hyped about. So what do you guys think? Will Go leave a lasting impression on the world at large, or is it kind of is the death knell ringing already?
Well, I think the first thing to note is that pretty much any game that's ever existed has had a huge drop-off after its sort of honeymoon launch period. And given that Pokemon Go fits both the criteria of being a game and existing, I'm not super surprised to see the same trend happening here. So I don't think it necessarily signals anything about Pokemon Go in particular, just kind of about the sort of hype cycle that all games go through. And Pokemon Go just happens to be a more pronounced hype cycle, just because it's more prominent and more well-known.
Yeah, that was sort of my first thought, too, was, you know, doesn't every game, and especially doesn't every mobile game, sort of spike up and then drop down for a while and then maybe spike up again? But I don't know the mobile market as well as I do the console market. So I looked up some thoughts from some analysts. There's Daniel Ahmed. He's ZHugeX on Twitter. He posts a lot of like graphs and stuff charting sales. And yeah, he posted basically a series of tweets saying, hey, this really isn't abnormal. And a lot of the metrics that these analysts are using to show that the game is declining in popularity aren't even very good metrics. And then also Dr. Serkan Toto, he's the CEO of a gaming consultancy company in Japan. He had similar things to say. So that kind of just reinforced my thoughts about it, that this isn't that big of a deal. Right. But I will agree with Stephen's points that to this point Niantic has not done a very good job at keeping enough like steady, interesting new features coming out, and they
take features away.
Yeah, and commercial products too. But the thing is, there's still so much potential for that, and this game got way bigger, way faster than they expected, and they're overwhelmed. So I don't want to get completely faithless here and say, oh, Niantic's not going to be able to keep this interesting. There's still a lot of potential to add, Gen 2 Pokemon and more trading and battling features and all kinds of stuff. But right now, they're not doing it. So I'll say if Niantic continues to sort of be slow to keep the game interesting, then eventually we're going to see it fade from being the top app in the world to just being a pretty good app. But I don't think it's in risk of dying anytime soon, and I think there is still potential for it to sort of return to that dominant form if Niantic can just kind of get their crap together.
See, I don't think there's potential for it to ever reach the kind of activity that it had at its peak. But I agree with you on pretty much everything you said. I would say that I don't really trust that Niantic can actually get those features out in a way that really excites people. I think that engagement and everything is going to be dropping off more and more, and those features aren't going to be doing enough to bring them back quickly enough. But I don't think it's near dead. I just wanted to point out that, I don't really think, given what we've seen from Niantic in the past, that they'll be able to have a moment where it can really have this big resurgence. I think it's mostly just going to be trending downwards with a couple spikes when they introduce some new things like Gen 2 Pokemon, Gen 3 Pokemon, stuff like that.
Well, and then another thing is they can use other Pokemon hype, like the launch of Sun and Moon, the launch of the Pikachu movie, etc., to draw attention back to Pokemon Go. So I think it would be a good strategy for them to introduce interesting new features at the same time that other big Pokemon news is breaking, and then use that to sort of bring people back into the fold.
Yep.
And sort of another sort of bright side comment, the peak was so high that even if they don't ever hit that peak again, even getting halfway there will already make them tons and tons of money. And of course, they're still charting almost at the top of the charts, or at the top of the charts most places around the world. So it's not like they're in trouble. It's just they're not in the launch high period anymore.
Hello everybody, thank you for listening to this Nintendo Week clip, NWC. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to us here on YouTube for more highlights and discussion videos from Nintendo Week podcast, or subscribe to us on iTunes for weekly breakdowns of all your Nintendo news, discussion segments on subjects, games, and more, and tons of other features. Thanks for listening, and we will see you tomorrow with another NWC.